Are you looking to learn more about how to improve your trunk strength, improve your squat, bench press, and deadlift? This is going to be the video for you. Let's get to it. Hey there, Brandon here from Thirst Gym, and today I'm going to help you improve your trunk strength to help you with your big three, your squat, your bench press, and your deadlift. When it comes to improving your trunk strength, most people think about the abdominals and what they look like when they're incredibly chiseled, lean, and a nice big six-pack. However, aesthetically that might look nice. That may not always mean that it's as strong as it possibly needs to be able to lift the most amount of weight when it comes to our big three, like our squat, our bench press, our deadlift. You can even throw the overhead press in there for good measure. We want strong, functional-based strength from our midsection to improve force transfer, helping us lift the most amount of weight. And the moves and the exercises that you're going to do and how you implement them into your training are going to be much different than focusing on just the visibility aspect, which is primarily just all based upon around nutrition and being lean enough. So let's talk about how you can improve your trunk training to be stronger. All right, to get started, when we talk about trunk training, I want to lay the groundwork here in terms of anatomy. So we want to understand what's going to make our trunk strong from an anatomical perspective on our body. Now, most people think of, again, that quote-unquote six-pack. And when you think of that six-pack, we're thinking about what I call the RA, or the rectus abdominis muscles. Those are your six-pack, quote-unquote muscles. This is what you see here, okay? That's going to be running up and down the front part of our body. However, we also have the TVA, the transverse abdominis, which is actually a deeper layer musculature, which usually you think of more when it comes to like doing a plank and people trying to talk about sucking in. When they do that, that's activation of that TVA, or that transverse abdominis, which is incredibly important when it comes to us lifting weight, which we'll talk about here later. We also have the obliques, both the internal and the external obliques. They basically run almost in a crisscross fashion onto our side, and depending upon which side you're looking at, they basically help us rotate side to side and also laterally flex side to side. Meanwhile, we also have the erectors, which is going to be on the back side. So what most people don't think about when it comes to your trunk training are the erectors, and those basically run all the way down from our head down to our back. We usually think of the low back erectors more so than anything else, but they really run all the way up and down the spine. Those nice, big, thick, meaty guide wire muscles, that's what those do and keep us nice and upright and our spine protected. We also have smaller musculature there in the multifidus, and this is basically from a segment to segment aspect. Again, these are much smaller muscles, but they do similar things as the erectors, but on a much smaller level, much more micro movement. And these are usually trained with something like a Jefferson curl or segmentation. Okay, they still get trained with the erectors, but think of these almost as like your quote-unquote rotator cuff underneath your delts from your shoulders. Same thing here with your spine. And then we have the QL, or the quadratus lumborum, one of the most important muscles when it comes to stabilizing the pelvis, but it also can be pesky and really tricky and cause a low back pain for people. But it is an important trunk muscular piece and muscle that we want to make sure that we're not only training, but that we're optimizing it to keep it healthy as well. We also have our diaphragm and our pelvic floor. So being able to create a nice stacked position, these are deep muscles that actually do work. And while we don't think about necessarily how they flex, the diaphragm is a muscle, the pelvic floor is a muscle, and how they work together can make us more rigid and strong. And if we have a strong diaphragm from an inhale and exhalation perspective, and we're putting it stacked over that pelvic floor, and that pelvic floor is strong, that's going to be able to optimize our force production as well. And if you have a weak one, it can cause other issues, which I'm not going to go into, but do know if you have pelvic floor issues, that can also cause low back pain or other things if it's not strong as well. And I also have others listed here, because this is what most people are going to think about when it comes to trunk training. However, really anything that's crossing your pelvis / midsection is doing something to aid your trunk stability. So a big one that many people think about or forget about are the lats, okay? Most people think of the lats doing your pull-ups and your chin-ups. However, they do attach down here on the iliac crest. And so by having the lats engaged, that can let us further stabilize our midsection. Another one would be the hip flexors, especially like the iliopsoas complex. Having strong hip flexors can help us control what our pelvis is doing. Usually people attack the hip flexors for low back pain, but having strong hip flexors can let you control that position much better. And those are just two muscles to be an example, but you can even really throw in your hamstrings in terms of your pelvic position, your adductors. There's other things you can throw in there. These are the big ones that we want to focus on here today from an anatomy perspective to stabilize that spine and make sure we're nice and strong. All right, now that we got the anatomy covered, we want to actually talk about bracing. So bracing 101 here, everything you need to know about creating a strong brace. And this is probably important for the squat and the deadlift, but it's even important for your bench press. The first thing I want to talk about here is going to be the diaphragm versus chest breathing, okay? Understand how to take in a quality inhale and produce a quality exhale is vital for being able to create that stacked position of our pelvis and our rib cage. And most people are going to lean towards being a chest breather. And what that means is when you breathe in, chest rises, big poofy chest, big masculine based position, right? However, what's bad about this is it creates this giant C curve in our body here, and that C curve means that we can no longer have a stacked rib cage and a stacked pelvis. And what happens is all that pressure gets pushed out towards the front, and if we're not stacked, we can't create an optimal brace whenever we go to do something else. So when it comes from a breathing perspective, we want to inhale through our nose ideally and actually feel that in a 360 degree fashion. So by 360 degrees, if we took a ball, we want to make sure that we're breathing up, we're breathing down, we're breathing front, we're breathing side to side, and we're breathing front to back. We are breathing all the way around that midsection. So no matter where I would put my hands, when I breathe in and go to brace, I'm going to be able to feel expansion to some degree. It may not be a lot, especially in the back, but I'll get you some coaching cues here in just a little bit, but that's what you want to think about, 360 degrees. Then we want to think about intra-abdominal pressure. Okay, not only do we want to take that inhale in, we want that inhale to be 365 degrees around, and we want there to be a lot of pressure so that when I go down, that pressure is contained, okay? And I've used this analogy before, but you want to think about having a Coke can, or I'm going to use this marker as an example, that if I am in a stacked position, this is pretty strong from top to bottom. However, if I go to actually have at an angle and apply pressure to an angle, one, I could probably snap this, but also if this was my Coke can, I come at an angle, when it goes to actually snap, it's going to bend out sideways, and we're going to lose our pressure sideways. But from top to bottom, that Coke can is actually pretty strong so long as your forces stay vertical, and that's what we want to have happen here. This lovely box here is my lovely Coke can, and we want that Coke can to be stacked from top to bottom, not only from our breathing perspective, so when we're breathing in and out, we want to make sure this stays stacked, but when I go to apply force from the ground and that bar is putting force into me, I can move as a unit, and that's going to let me lift the most amount of weight. All right, now that we've got that down, let's talk about some drills that I like to help you understand your breathing and your bracing. So the first one that you can do is a prone position. Some people will call it alligator breathing. And basically what you're gonna do is you're just gonna lay down on your belly, on the ground. You can even do it in a bed, doesn't really matter. And you're gonna take like a pillow, an Airex pad, maybe a rolled up towel, what have you. And you're gonna place that underneath your belly, around your belly button level, and then you can take your hands and place them on your back, or you can place them above here by your head, doesn't really matter. And then what you're going to do is you're going to breathe in through your nose, and you're going to actually try to breathe into that towel or that pad or that pillow that you have. Breathe into that, and then as you breathe into that, you're actually going to feel your back expand as well. And so you're going to feel that back expand, feel your side expand, and then exhale and feel all that come out. That's one way to just immediately be able to feel what it's like to be able to have those pressures go all around your midsection. The second one is going to be taking a band and placing it around your midsection, or putting around your waist, or your hands around your waist as well, and you can do the same thing. We kind of talked about that, but the band one I like because you can actually get it tight and you can actually feel it expand and then contract back in on you, and it's actually going to give you some stimulus of whether you're actually breathing and pushing out hard enough. But then when you create that brace, the thing I like about the band, after you take that inhale and then you hold it, if you actually have a solid brace, you can still talk at the same time for a prolonged period amount of time because you're braced down here, and then you're obviously gonna have to exhale and then re-inhale again. But that's a good feedback loop that I also like as well. And if you don't have that, you can also have a partner or a belt place their hands around you, or you can put your belt in there and then put your fingers inside your belt like this, and then breathe in, exhale, and be able to crush your fingers or your partner's fingers in that belt, and then you would actually brace down and they shouldn't be able to get their fingers out, and that's how you know that you've got a good brace. So use these 3 drills to immediately know and get the feedback that you understand your bracing. And if you understand your bracing, now we can move on to the exercise piece. All right, now before we go into the exact exercises that I like, here's a big question that commonly gets asked when it comes to trunk training, just in general, but especially powerlifting or improving your big 3 is, should you resist or create movement? And what I mean by that is, when we do our trunk training, are we actually just trying to do a lot of bracing and resisting stuff? Or should we be doing some kind of actual, like actually doing rotation and actually doing lateral flexion and actual flexion extension? You're going to hear this debated probably until the end of time, because research really kind of supports both. And when research supports both, that's the best ever. It depends. So I'm going to try to give you some pros and cons of each thing here, and kind of like the benefits of what we can kind of get from what the research says, anecdotally what I've found, and then just talking with other high-level coaches and athletes as well, what they've kind of found. So when it comes to resisting, the pros are that it's going to be mimicking what we actually do in sport or in this particular aspect. The goal here is maximum force transfer, okay? Being able to put as much force we can into the ground, up into the bar to be able to lift it. And so rigidity is great. We have this thing called irradiation, and so when we create irradiation all the way through the chain of our arms, our legs, our midsection, force transfers better and we're stronger. So that's obviously a huge pro when it comes to doing that. The cons of resisting, that it actually makes you more like a refrigerator, okay? Our body was designed to move and be fluid. We look at the gait cycle, our ribs rotate and twist, our pelvis rotates and twists, our arms move, we actually move side to side all the time, we bend over and pick stuff up, we extend and do stuff. Our body is designed to be pliable. So that is a con, that we're just teaching us to be rigid and we would walk like this, okay? I'm a good example if you've ever seen me walk. I don't walk too fluidly. So creating the pros are obviously going to be that we stay fluid, we keep natural joint actions the way that they should be, and that should be keeping us resilient. However, the cons could be that by doing that, we could potentially put us in some risky situations, right? If we look at something like a Jefferson curl or heavy decline sit-ups and things like that. Some people are going to say that that could potentially cause herniated discs or aggravate discs or aggravate nerves. All very possible, okay? Usually that happens more when you push things too fast, too soon, right? You're not listening to your body, give your body time to adapt. But that is a legitimate concern where when you're doing the more rigid-based stuff, don't really hear anybody about aggravating their back doing a powerlift hold, right? Or doing a dead bug, right? So some things to consider there. The benefits that we have, though, are taking a multi-prong approach here, and doing a little bit of both is going to be making us just more well-rounded. We're going to get the benefits of what we do from each. However, we're going to have to methodically think about how we put these into our training programs and how they benefit us when it comes to competing or doing the big lifts, the squat, the bench press, and even the overhead press. So we want to think about the long-term benefits as well, from a health perspective and a movement perspective. So we've got to sprinkle in exactly what we need to be specific towards certain tasks or certain lifts, and that will push us forward in our progress. So let's actually talk about those exercises. All right, so for the first group of exercises we're going to talk about here are going to be anti-extension. And so what that means is that's going to prevent us from going in an extended position. And these are just some of the exercises that I personally like. There's other variations out there. We'll kind of talk about some of the benefits here and some tweaks that you can make to really help aid you with your lifts here. So the plank is kind of like the good old-fashioned one. I really like RKC planks. If you've never done those before, it's just a regular plank, but you're going to create as much full body tension as possible. And that's going to be more specific towards like your squat and your deadlift. But also, you want to have your palm down and actually reach your body away, get the serratus involved, and that's actually going to get your internal obliques involved a little bit as well. Open up the backside. It's going to be a lot better for you than just a regular plank to where you're extended like this. Okay, we're trying to actually resist that position. Same thing with the ab wheel, but it's actually going to be for reps. We're trying to resist that extended position. We've got to keep those ribs pulled down as we're going to do that position to keep us in a good spot. Body saw is basically just an advanced plank variation. I like doing ours with a slide board or bow slides. All work great. Hollow holds and rocks are also great because we can actually load those up. So yes, you can put weight on your planks, but the hollow hold and rocks, we can actually hold weight or a med ball on our feet and actually make that a more challenging position. And the rocking piece can actually add some instability as well. And we can really make sure we're trying to keep that stack of our rib cage and our pelvis, and by challenging both the feet and being overhead can really challenge that position. And the stir pot is just a good old classic one, a la Brian Carroll and Stu McGill. Really popularized this in the powerlifting game, but you create those small micro movements. You're not only going to get that anti-extension piece, but you're going to get a lot of other pieces, and those small muscles like the multifidi and what have you are all going to have to work incredibly hard as we create those micro movements to hunker down and stay in position and prevent ourselves from extending. So these are kind of like my 5 go-tos here for this particular category. Again, usually time weighted, or for reps, you can kind of adjust them depending upon what you're doing. But chances are, if you're sticking with these, you're going to train that anti-extension based pattern. And I find that these work really well for people that have a lot of a hard time of understanding what it's like not being in an extended base position, because actually pushing out in front of you and locking into that position, think of hollow rocks here, locking into that position can do a lot of great things for being able to be in a solid squat position. So these are a lot of my go-tos for my squatters. All right, now we're going to talk about the anti-flexion based exercises. And while this list looks a little shorter, this front-loaded one can get pretty long if we really try to extrapolate it out. So we're going to try to resist flexion here. And so one of the big ones and go-to ones that I like is any kind of dead bug variation. We're on the ground, arms are going to get long, and we're going to try to actually resist that flexion of that flexed moment that we're going to be able to create there. The front-loaded one is kind of also my big go-to as well. So by having a front-loaded position, that weight's trying to pull us forward, and so what we're going to do is we're actually going to stay nice and tall and resist that and push our center of mass back and own that position, okay? So we're basically trying to prevent ourselves from falling forward. Dead bugs seem counterintuitive to that, but because you get long with those arms and go back and forth, we're actually creating some flexion with our movements, but we're actually trying to make sure that when we do that, we're not actually crunching. We're keeping our center of mass and everything pushed back. So we're actually getting some anti-extension as well, but we're also getting anti-flexion involved. And I kind of load it under here underneath my anti-flexion because it does seem like a misnomer, but usually you're trying to resist that flexion-based motion happening of actually trying to come down. We're trying to stay as neutral as we can. It's kind of a mixed one, if I had to be honest. But the other one we really like here is the Chinese plank. The Chinese plank is where you're going to take your shoulders and your feet, you're going to put them on 2 benches, and it's basically the upside down version of a plank. And so you're going to use your glutes and your hamstrings and your back to push your body forward, but you still want to make sure you stay stacked. Instead, that's going to prevent you from actually flexing together. And so this is going to develop the backside much more. So usually I think of these of how they're going to develop the backside of staying nice and erect and nice and tall. So if you're constantly getting pushed forward, especially in like your squat and your deadlifts, you want to look at these anti-flexion based exercises more so than anything else to help correct those. There's tons of different dead bug variations here on my channel, tons of front-loaded different variations as well. I actually don't think I have a video of the Chinese planks. I'll put that on the to-do list, but you can tell how these can immediately impact your performance. So I like these for athletes just in general, but for the most part, if you're a strength athlete, these are really going to aid your position for your squat and your deadlift and make you more robust. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about here is anti-rotation based exercises. And these exercises are going to be preventing us from moving side to side. We're actually going to try to resist that rotation. And these are some of my go-tos that I like here. Most people have probably heard of powerlift presses and holds, where you're going to hold a band or a cable here, and you can do it from different positions: half kneeling, tall kneeling, split stance, standing. Doesn't matter, use a cable or a band. Very common one to be able to do that, presses and holds. The other thing I also like as well is making people draw letters and numbers. That's going to actually get things a little bit more rhythmic and challenge that stability a little bit more. Another one that's not thought of a whole lot are renegade rows. While they're not a great back developer, they're a fantastic anti-rotation developer, and we can actually obviously integrate what our arms are doing, and that can be a great way to challenge our trunk musculature in different ways outside of just your normal powerlift presses, because that's what most people are gonna think about. Also, I've got landmine rotation based / exercises, and really I think about half rotations. You can do full rotations as well, but if you take a landmine and just go from here, your body is rotating a little bit, but for the most part, you're hunkering down, bracing, and trying to lift that landmine up. That is, those half rotation and different rotation-based exercises like that are also fantastic exercises to learn how to do that, and they will fry your midsection and make them incredibly strong. One of my really good go-tos as of late for some people. And then also single arm based work in terms of upper body training. So if we're doing a single arm dumbbell press, my body is trying to rotate, but I'm having to hunker down and keep that nice and still. Same thing if I'm doing like a single arm dumbbell row or a Meadows row or a single arm barbell row, single arm inverted row, like anything you're doing something single arm related, you're resisting rotation as you're going to do that. So you can sneak in some good anti-rotation work with smart upper body accessory training, which I think is highly missed out on for most people. And you can actually check this box on your upper body day and do things that are actually going to aid not only your bench press, obviously, but even your squat and your deadlift. So make sure that you got something from this box implemented into your weekly training plan, because I do think it does keep your low back and your pelvis feeling good and healthy in the long run. I wish I would have done more of this stuff back in my day, but these are also some sneaky ways that you can add in outside of just your good old-fashioned powerlift press. All right, now let's talk about our anti-lateral flexion exercises. Those are gonna be the exercises that resist us from moving side to side. We're gonna feel it more so on one side versus the other. Some of these are pretty common. The side plank is kind of like your general go-to thought of anti-lateral flexion exercise. Not a bad thing. You can load it up with something on your side, but generally it's a little bit harder to progress that. But I do think side planks are a great introductory based exercise, or even something great that you can do as part of your warm-up. Also, like the suitcase carry and the suitcase hold. So that's where we're going to hold one load on one side and we're just going to carry it or march in place or just stand in place, and we're going to resist that. That's one that you can load up pretty freaking hard. The other one that you can do on top of this, like I said, is just marching in place. So if you don't have a way to walk, but that's going to involve the gait cycle, so that's going to give you some hip stability as well, so it's a little bit more active. We also have offset load training. That's kind of what a suitcase is, but you can do like an offset front rack, you could do an offset waiter, you could do your Bulgarian split squats or single leg RDLs offset with just one arm loaded, and that's going to again challenge that anti-lateral flexion on that side. We also have Copenhagen planks as another one to be able to integrate the adductors into this, so you're going to get a mix of that side plank and get some groin health from it. It's going to be a little more challenging. Another one I don't have up here as well that I just thought of that I probably should have put on this list is going to be the side plank. I guess it is technically a side plank, but doing it off the, my handwriting's terrible, off the GHR, and so you're just going to be on the glute ham raise, holding that position to be able to level it up. You also do a 45-degree back extension if you want to, but again, another advanced side plank variation that's one more challenging, like considerably more challenging, but you could also hold a weight in your hand and load that up and get that to be harder. So this again is usually going to be from resisting that side to side, and that's important because that's going to allow us to be able to train our QLs, our internal external obliques a lot harder, to be able to bear down and hold that position. So as we go to fill out strong on the sides, we've already covered the front and back portion, so now we have actually created that full Coke can of resisting motion and being able to improve that brace. All right, we are ready for the last piece here, and that's going to be deflection or creating motion, because I got some stuff on here that's obviously not actually true flexion. But the goal I want you to think about here is actually creating flexion and movement about the spine, okay? These are kind of like my go-tos that I really like using. Leg raises, with hanging leg raises and from a captain's chair, all great because we're gonna integrate the hip flexors, the lower abdominals, and that's going to be able to strengthen that portion of it. Reverse crunches, kind of the same thing, but however, when you get nice and long, you can actually get a braced position there. That's going to be more like your dead bug or your hollow hold, so you can kind of get a 2-for-1 with that one. When it comes to your side bends, I really like doing this with a kettlebell or a dumbbell, but you can even do it with a barbell. But getting long, it's gonna lengthen that QL and then come down and pull down, and that's going to create that crunch. So for me, I like that because it allows some loaded lengthening of the QL more so than anything else, but you're also gonna, again, strengthen up that side, and that's going to help keep the rib cage and the pelvic mechanics feeling good, which is something I wish I would have done more of in my career for sure. Standing abs, one of my go-to things for the squat in terms of abdominals, teaches you how to root your feet. You're going to be able to create some space in the backside of your pelvis as you go to do it. You're actually going to feel your actual TVA and your abdominals as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of good things here. You're also working on your hinging mechanics. And then our decline sit-up, I like this because you can load it. I like doing overhead reach variations to be a little more honest with it, but also do it a little bit more segmented and controlled. And so by this, what I'm really talking about is as you go to sit up, really trying to actually control up and then also control down, and that's going to give you a better stimulus and let you work on that multifidi in terms of the segmentation piece of it. And then another good old-fashioned one, just the Turkish get-up, okay? This exercise does not get used enough just in general, but I do think powerlifters can really benefit from doing this because it is going to incorporate everything that we talked about, even though it is pretty flexion heavy, but it does build a nice, strong, resilient midsection, and it is pretty functional to everyday life, if you want to use that word functional. So this is kind of like one of my go-tos as well. Now, something I didn't put on here are rotational based things, like actually doing rotation based work. I do think there's a time and a place to be able to use that in like an off season to make sure that you're doing rotational based work. However, I think if you're doing some of the landmine rotations and different powerlift stuff, you're going to check close to some of those boxes. Doing chops and lifts can be other things that work well. But rotation-based work to me doesn't fall underneath this flexion. It's not a high priority list item for me in terms of improving the big three. I think it's great for overall health, so I do think in your yearly plan it needs to be definitely prioritized and programmed at certain points. But for the most part, it's one of those few actions that I kind of just leave out and just make sure that I'm doing it during the off season to restore some range of motion and feel good. The other thing I'll say about the flexion-based stuff here is everything that we do in powerlifting is extension-based. Squatting, benching, and deadlifting. This does the opposite of that. And that's why I'm in favor of flexion-based exercises throughout the year, throughout your training, because if we're doing all this extension-based stuff, we want to try to balance that out to some degree to be able to close this side down, get that backside to relax, shift the center of mass backwards with some of our training, and abdominal training is a great way to do that. And the worst thing that happens is your abs are just a little sore at the end of the day. So make sure you're keeping some of these exercises in your training plan pretty much all year round. And I think it will do some damage control over the long-term portion of your training life. All right, now we're going to talk about the integration / programming side. How can you implement this into your training programs? So first we're talking about like in terms of the sessions or throughout the week, and then I'm going to talk about the lifts in particular, what I kind of like. Again, you can adjust as you wish, but this is just my opinion. So the first one's going to be doing some kind of abdominal work during your warm-up. In my opinion, this is the easiest time to get in some quote-unquote free work because you usually are going to need to warm up anyways. So if you can sneak in some extra abdominal work, I think you're going to see a good return on your investment, and it's going to help prepare you for the session at hand. It can be a lighter, easier variation of what you have planned to do for the day, or it could be something that you know you need to work on, you're not strong at, or if your back aggravating you, something to get your back feeling good. Okay. Usually for here, I like doing things like planks or side planks, rolling planks, Copenhagen planks or Copenhagen dips, some light side bends, some light standing abs, some light leg raises, some light reverse hypers, right? Those are all things that are going to develop the midsection, but actually benefit me from a training perspective as well and getting me warmed up for the session. So if you're not doing this, 2 to 3 sets. I mean, you can create a small mini circuit of doing just a couple pallet presses on each side, doing some Copenhagen dips, doing some reverse hypers, do that 2 or 3 times. Your heart rate's gonna be elevated, you're gonna feel good, ready to go, and then you can just go on with your regular session regardless of what your emphasis is for that day. Now, the most popular, obviously, is doing it at the end of your training session. Usually what I do, what I think most people do, the pitfall to this is that you're most likely to skip it, especially if you're short on time, you're not feeling it, you're just ready to get out of there. I'll do it another time. Okay, that's the bad thing about this. But generally speaking, that's where you're gonna find it, but you can still load it up and treat it hard with your normal accessory work. I also like putting this in with my single leg work personally, just if you wanna think about where you can mix it in. That's where time that I've found has been a good portion of my own training to where I, one, won't skip it because I know I'm not gonna skip my single leg work, but also fits well because it's kind of like, what do I pair with my single leg work, especially on lower body because it is so intensive. Abdominal trunk work is a good plug to do. You can put it on your accessory days. So if you got a lighter day that you go and just do accessory work, do it there and push it pretty hard. You can also put it on your off days at home, doing small GVV based cycles. Like I talked about, like pallet presses and holds and the plank variations and the dead bugs. Like those are things you can literally do anywhere for the most part. So if you feel that you need to bring those up, those are obviously things that you can do from home, and you don't have to go hard. Just literally 10 minutes of focusing on that and getting that brace down and improving it can help you in the long run. Now, when it comes to doing it on your specific lifts, so I've got squat, bench press, deadlift, and then other could be if you have another squat day, another bench day, an overhead press day. I'm looking at a 4-day cycle here, but really you can just pick these based upon the exercises, and you can put them on your program as you wish. When I do squatting based exercises, I really like focusing on anti-extension and flexion based movements. So that's kind of where I go first, and that's what I usually put with those days. I will sometimes swap them out with the deadlift variation one here, which is then where I like to put the flexion based work. Okay, completely interchangeable, but generally speaking, for the squat, I like to do these because I feel like it works on actually being able to create my brace and stay tight. And usually I found that when you do deadlift variations, your low back, you're usually kind of extended, things are kind of bothering you. The flexion can kind of reverse some of that, maybe potentially get some extra blood flow and recovery into the low back to help end that session. I think that's overall a good benefit, but up to you, you kind of get the idea where I'm going here. On the bench press day, I like doing anti-rotation, anti-lateral flexion based work. Again, so you can do this with single arm variations to kind of get that rotation. You can put in specific exercises for the lateral flexion as well. Totally up to you, but again, that's my approach. And then I actually go in terms of creating more flexion-based work. Again, I should have put this more as a lateral flexion, but generally speaking, this is where I would actually do my side bends and things of that nature, Copenhagen dips, what have you, on that other base day. That way I make sure I'm checking all the boxes of the movements, and then when I know I need to double down on something, again, I can go back and throw it into my warm-up. I can do extra work on that other day or the bench press day if I really want to be able to focus on something because I know that I'm going to be able to recover from it a little bit better. Totally up to you, but that gives you an actionable way to implement it regardless if you know what lift you're training. Just throw in something that falls underneath that category and you're going to be good to go. So there you have it. That should be everything that you need to improve your trunk strength to aid your squat, your bench press, and your deadlift, and even your overhead press. But if you do powerlifting, that's going to give you everything that you need to know. This is how I personally work with clients and athletes all the time. It's how I've structured my own training in the past. Still how I grab some ideas, even though I'm no longer competing. I still usually follow a lot of these templates and ideas and systems to be able to make sure that my trunk and everything feels nice and strong. So you want to be sure here that you're chasing function first, more so than anything else. However, sometimes your function also has to keep you healthy when it comes to lifting maximal weights. So that's why I think a blend of resisting motion and a blend of creating motion is the best of both worlds, regardless of what somebody might try to sell you of just going down one road. The literature supports both. So implement both in a methodical manner and you will see your mid-session strength, your brace improve, and overall your numbers climb. If you happen to take away one awesome thing from today's video, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, share with a friend, leave me a comment, let me know how it helped you, and I'll see you at the next video.